Hey guys, Lorik here, and welcome to the Inner Circle. Today we're going to be talking about ESO Dungeons, our likes, dislikes, and overall experiences. Before we get started, I'll hand you over to Webbey.
Thanks, Lorik, and to get this party started, I'm going to be talking about our roles in the game. We have Lorik down the back as a healing Templar, in the middle we have Medousa as a DPS Warden, and up the front is myself copying hammers to the face as a Dragon Knight tank. We've been grinding dungeons to level up quickly. Not sure whether this is the fastest way to go about it, but we're getting about 1 to 1.5 levels per dungeon completed. I'm going to hand you over to Meadow, talking about his experiences with the dungeons and in particular what he dislikes about.
Hey guys, so for me the dungeons are overall they're pretty good. The difficulty though is where it's lacking, and for me the dungeon needs to be hard. It needs to be challenging, and right now I don't feel that I'm getting exactly that. So I'm not entirely sure if when we do progress a little bit higher, if the dungeons are actually going to be more difficult. And I really hope that's going to be the case, because I look for something like that in a game and in instances in particular.
I totally agree with you, man, because right now I just don't feel as though I really need to heal per se, because I always tend to find myself changing over to my Staff of Destruction and trying to DPS as well. I just don't feel the difficulty is there in the ESO dungeons. So for me, I really want to be challenged, and I'm always asking Webby to keep pulling, packs and packs of mobs. So I just don't feel the difficulty is there, and we're just screaming through them.
So that's the thing, right? Like, one big thing we've noticed in contrast to something like a World of Warcraft MMO is that the boss encounters, it's like we're pulling groups of mobs and then it's like, oh hey, there's a boss in here. For me personally, it doesn't really make it feel very immersive. The other thing I've noticed, and this is probably me being just a bad player, but I don't feel like I'm tanking the bosses. Like, people are generally kiting them, and I'm not sure whether later on there's particular abilities you get to have threat or you need to stun bosses or whatever, but I certainly haven't felt like I've been tanking them in that defined role.
Yeah, look, the bosses are a bit of a joke in the dungeons we've done, at least. And it really it kind of deters me from wanting to do it, other than just get in there and level, really. So the bosses do have their mechanics and stuff, and all mobs do, so where you literally have to get out of things that is red on the ground, and it actually shows you where they're facing or around them in a circle, or little splodges everywhere, so you have to get out of it. And that's fine, and that's pretty fun to do. However, it's very easy, and again, it's just one of those things. The difficulty of the dungeons and the bosses and encounters are just not to my liking. I would like them to be a bit more fine-tuned.
Well, when I think of difficulty, I think of resource management and how hard you have to work on managing your health points and your mana pool. I think of how hard it is to pull groups of mobs and whether they need to be crowd controlled or not. And realistically, I don't think there's been that much of it in what we've played so far.
Absolutely. I don't think that we have had to crowd control at all, to be honest. I have found myself needing to use a pot every now and then, but that's because you're pulling 2 or 3 packs at the one time. With the boss encounters, though, you guys, when you're not getting out of the mechanics, I see your health drop to half health. So sometimes it does get a little bit tough, but as I said, I do find myself needing to dodge mechanics to be able to keep you guys healed. Other than that, like, it's not very hard to dodge the mechanics. So the bosses aren't very hard, and I'm finding us being able to stay in the mechanics of the normal mobs and not having to get out of the mechanics because they don't really hurt. So
I guess talking about bosses, I think every boss in every dungeon drops personal loot. I don't think it's like some of the dungeons you get loot at the end or anything like that. I'm pretty sure it's personal loot on all the bosses. I'm not a big fan of personal loot. I feel as though personal loot was born from the salty tears of people that couldn't wait for loot. I do also empathise with people in the fact that it's probably a necessary evil. And I will also mention that the other night we did like 6 runs, and it took me all of the 6 runs to get 2 pieces of gear I needed. And I think Lorik, you'll be able to confirm that, but you got all your pieces in 1 run, was it?
Yeah, I ended up getting it in 2 runs actually, and that's why I don't like personal loot per se, because I mean in 2 runs I got a full set of gear. So what was that? That was I think 5 or 6 pieces. So for me, I just feel like it's a little bit too easy. But it does have RNG, so I can get items that Webbey may need or Medousa may need. So I don't mind getting those items and being able to trade them. But other than that, I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah, so look, the personal loot really gives you 2 hours to trade anyone in your group that was in your group that happened to be there when you got the item. So for me, personal loot, I have never liked it. I'm more an old school kind of person, and I would rather distribute items instead of just looting.
Or even roll for them.
Yeah, like exactly. So, I'm not a fan at all of the loot at all.
So then I guess that brings us into what our thoughts are on the group sizes. I really, really like the group sizing of 4 people per dungeon. It's just a small amount of people you need to find to actually do a dungeon, and when it's a group of like 3 or 4 of your mates, like that's the group. And let's face it, you have the most fun when you're playing with your mates.
Absolutely. Like you can literally just log on and just start dungeoning or start grouping up. You can actually start doing content where most games where you can't. And it's easy because also with the dungeon finder, you can group, you can add us up to the dungeon finder, and it will just instantly port us into the next dungeon. And we don't have to wait for forever to be able to get in there, and we don't have to quick travel and waste our gold or run over there. We can just instantly port over, which is great.
Yeah, so the Dungeon Finder tab or feature is really useful. I wouldn't like to be a DPS and try to queue up. In other games that we've played, World of Warcraft in particular, it sometimes takes, depending on the time that you've logged in at, it takes up to about an hour to get into queue. The tank and healing role normally takes 5 to 10 minutes, so it's not really a great deal. You can go and do your little dailies, or you just go do quests, grind, or even craft. And I would suggest everyone do that as a DPS, because you're going to be waiting a while.
Yeah, so Lorik and I have signed up, and it's been 5 seconds, I think, to get a group every time. And one person joined the other day, Rage, his name was. He said he was waiting for about half an hour as a DPSer, so that might give everyone an indication of what they might be in for, depending on what role they choose in the game.
Okay, so that sums up everything on the ESO Dungeons. So, Meadow, what are your final thoughts on your experiences?
Yeah, cheers, man. So if I was to give the dungeons a rating out of 10, I would give them a 5. And the reason I give them a 5 is because I don't really enjoy the difficulty. The boss encounters are pretty simple, very easy to get out of things. And, the overall monsters in there that don't really give much of a challenge. Also, the loot, again, like I said, I'm pretty old school with everything, so I would rather distribute loot and roll on things than actually have personal loot. It really means that everyone can progress like really fast, and I'm not really about that. I'm about more of a long game kind of thing. So for me, again, it's a 5, and that's what I think about that. So Webbey, what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Meadow. Well, if I had to rate the game out of 10, I would give it a 7, and the reason for that is I too find the difficulty really easy. I feel like it could be a little bit more immersive. I don't really feel like boss encounters are something you sit there and you're like, oh wow, we're about to go and fight a boss or whatever. But other than that, I think in general they're fairly well polished, and a big plus for me is basically the group size in the dungeons, and still graphically they're amazing. And the mechanics, like every NPC having a mechanic you have to get out of, I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, a 7.
Yeah, well, I think it's. I'll give it a 5, just because the difficulty isn't there, and that's a huge part of the game to me. I really need to feel challenged, especially in dungeons. The only thing that I really love about the dungeons is definitely the group size, and also I just can't get over how great the game actually looks. It's absolutely stunning. But yeah, that's just a 5.
Well guys, that wraps up this episode on our experiences with ESO Dungeons. If you disliked it, please give some feedback in the comments below so we can improve our content. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. If you thought this video was the duck's nuts, please subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.